Welcome to the House Committee on Corporations. Today is Tuesday, March 23rd. We're in the House Lounge. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Solomon.
Present.
First Vice Chair O'Brien. Second Vice Chair Caldwell.
Present.
Representative Casey.
Present.
Representative Chippendale. Representative Fenton Fong.
Present.
Representative Hawkins.
Present.
Representative Kazarian. Representative Kennedy.
Present.
Representative Charlene Lima. Representative Stephen Lima. Representative Phillips.
Present.
Representative Potter.
Present.
Representative Serpa.
Present.
Representative Shallcross Smith.
Present.
Chairman, there is a quorum.
Thank you. The first bill we have on the calendar is House Bill 6068 by Chairman Casey, an act to vacate the forfeiture or revocation of the charter of Vernier Associates Incorporated. Is there a motion for passage?
So moved.
Made by Vice Chair Caldwell.
Second.
Seconded by Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Chairman Solomon.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Caldwell.
Yes.
Representative Casey.
Yes.
Representative Fenton Fong.
Yes.
Representative Hawkins.
Yes.
Representative Kazarian. Representative Kennedy.
Yes.
Representative Charlene Lima.
Yes.
Representative Stephen Lima. Representative Phillips.
Yes.
Representative Potter.
Yes.
Representative Serpa.
Yes.
Representative Shallcross Smith.
Yes.
Chairman, the motion passes.
All right, 6068 passes and goes to the floor. Is there a motion to hold the remainder of the
So
bill for
moved.
further study?
Second.
Made by Representative Phillips, seconded by Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy and Vice Chair Caldwell. The clerk please take the roll.
Chairman Solomon.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Caldwell.
Yes.
Representative Casey.
Yes.
Representative Fenton Fong.
Yes.
Representative Hawkins.
Yes.
Representative Kazarian. Representative Kennedy.
Yes.
Representative Charlene Lima. Representative Phillips.
Yes.
Representative Potter.
Yes.
Representative Serpa.
Yes.
And Representative Shallcross Smith.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, so we have many bills on the calendar tonight. I would ask that the witnesses try to keep their testimony to under 3 minutes. We have received a significant amount of written testimony, so if a person has provided written testimony, I would request that they just summarize their comments, and if there's anything additional to add. All that written testimony will be on the General Assembly webpage if it isn't already, so.
How do I waive? Oh, wait a minute.
So the first bill we will take up is House Bill 5915 by Chairman Hull. Chairman Hull, this bill would require cable television companies to give their customers the option to purchase at its fair market value a device which decodes digital cable signals for the cable signal reception. Chairman Hull.
Thank you, and I'll be short. I put this bill in every year. It's a consumer bill. And what the cable companies are actually doing to us by making us buy a box that they have fully control over, but it's in your home, and all it does is descramble the signal into your house. Now, mind you, that signal's being scrambled back at their home base. So there's really no need for that set-top box, or if there is a need for that set-top box, over the course of 10 years, you've done paid for that set-top box 3, 4, 5, 6 times over, and they buy it by the gross. So they're getting them like 8 cents, 10 cents, or whatever it is. That's all this does, and I won't belabor it. The cable companies know that I put this in. They say technology is going to change where you won't need it, but I do this on purpose because it's the right thing to do. Just let me buy the equipment, and I'll take it from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Are there any questions for the sponsor? I see that Deputy Speaker Lima has her hand up. Okay, it's been, you're muted.
Sorry, Chairman, I thought it was on my bill. Nope. I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you. We have received written testimony from Verizon and the New England Cable and Telecommunications Association, both against this bill. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5915. Next, we'll go to House Bill 5916 by Chairman Hull. And Chairman, I'll let you explain your bill.
Thank you. This one's another one that I put in every year, but this one goes to the root of my neighborhood and the people who I represent. Not all, but some. Where Narragansett Electric was not Narragansett Electric, and most National Grid, they don't actually have a customer service facility here in Rhode Island. Now, people say, oh, that's not a problem, you can go to your local store and pay your bill. Well, some of my constituents don't have a checking account. But when they go to that place to pay their bill, they're charged a fee for paying their electric bill. Now, tell me there's not something wrong with that. But mind you, when it was actually Narragansett Electric, they used to have a place on Melrose Street where you could go and pay your bill, or do what they do in New York. They put up little kiosks, put your money in, and it's done. Now, I've been through this quite often. I'm not going to belabor this bill because National Grid is actually going to leave Rhode Island. And from what I'm reading about PPL, their customer service is much, much better. So with that said, I will end this. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the sponsor? Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for putting this bill in again, because I too have had some customers or some constituents that are customers of National Grid that have no place to put it. They need to drive down someplace, or they need to pay, as you said, pay that fee, $1.50, whatever it is. So my suggestion may be, not a question, but maybe to reach out to PPL right now and say, you're coming into the state, we want to get this thing done, we need to have you have service centers in here so that you can service all of the constituents of the state of Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I'd rather have them come in here, we could talk to them. I don't want to spoil the remnants of National Grid.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, are there any other questions? Seeing none, that concludes the verbal testimony on that bill. Was written testimony against from Verizon, as well as written testimony against from National Grid. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 5916. Next, we will take up House Bill 5908 by Representative Mclaughlin. This bill would require the formulation of a plan to reduce or waive fees and taxes for businesses negatively impacted by COVID-19. Representative Mclaughlin.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for hearing this bill. Very simply put, this is a bill for small business, okay? I know everybody realized they suffered tremendous loss during this COVID, you know, state license fees, meal taxes, so on and so forth during this. What this bill would do, it would actually take some of that COVID money that's coming down the pike, okay, and put it towards small businesses, you know. When I say small relative, right now the bill implies 50 or under, you know. Maybe it should be 100 or other. I'd leave that up to the chairman if we could do a sub-A on it, you know. But it's a good bill, and what it basically would do, a lot of businesses were out of business or just hanging in there by a thread, and they still had to pay their licensing fees, you know. And meal taxes, 6%. So the average meal tax, probably $1,000 per business, you know. Licensing fees, I'm not sure about that, but I would ask that you would consider this bill and, you know, get it out to the floor and make it a part of the people we represent in the state of Rhode Island and the small businesses to say, we hear you, you know, we're going to try and compensate you. With that said, if you have any questions, please feel free.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
We have received written testimony in favor from the National Federation of Independent Businesses, as well as Jordan Goyette. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5908. The next bill we will go to is by Representative Fenton Fong. That would be 5905. This would require publicly held corporations to be represented by women on their board of directors. Fines would be imposed for noncompliance. There is one person signed up on this bill, Randall Rice, from the Treasurer Magazine's office. You're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Solomon, members of the committee. My name is Randy Rice. I'm Treasurer Magaziner's Senior Advisor on Policy and Commission Communications, which includes managing the Treasurer's shareholder engagement work. I'm testifying on the Treasurer's behalf in support of H5905 and thank Representative Fenton Fong for sponsoring this legislation. The Rhode Island pension system at $9.5 billion, which is managed by the Treasurer's Office, invests in thousands of publicly traded companies. As long-term investors, we believe that board diversity, inclusive of skills, gender, and ethnicity, is an important consideration as we work to protect shareholder value and maximize returns for our members. An increasing body of research shows that companies with stronger diversity at the senior level, they tend to outperform those companies that lack diverse leadership teams. Under Treasurer Magaziner's leadership, Rhode Island adopted a policy to vote against board nominees at publicly traded companies if the board would be less than 30% diverse, inclusive of race, ethnicity, and gender. And when we adopted that in 2016, Rhode Island was only the second state pension fund to do so. Rhode Island is an active member in the 30% Coalition, which is a national organization that is working to increase diversity in corporate boardrooms so that they reflect the gender, racial, and ethnic diversity of the U.S. workforce. And Treasurer Magaziner has worked to diversify boards and committees here in Rhode Island. Over half of the Treasurer's nominees to the State Investment Commission, Retirement Board, Public Finance Management Board have been diverse candidates. This proposed legislation is an important step for the diversity and inclusion. It advances equitable gender representation on corporate boards, adding additional perspectives in decision-making, which is good for everyone, and we urge support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Now we'll go to Representative Fenton Fong.
Thank you, Chairman. My apologies for just being out of the room for a minute. So 5905 is based on landmark legislation that came out of California and was passed in 2018. Several other states are also considering this similar legislation. A 2020 report by Spencer Stewart showed that nationwide, 72% of all board directors are actually male. And there's even more severe imbalances, and we're looking at sectors like healthcare, energy, and IT, all kind of important sectors here in Rhode Island. When we looked at studies around the world, in Europe, when you actually increased the number of female members on the boards, it correlated with a better financial performance for the company. In South Korea, the more female directors on their boards correlated with a higher corporate social responsibility performance score. So we see that they do better financially and that they tend to be better corporate citizens as well. As far as the specifics of the legislation, by January of 2022, all corporate publicly traded SEC companies here would have to have at least one female director on their board, and then it would be up to at least a minimum of 3 for a board of 6 or more by January of 2023. Females make up 51+% of the population in Rhode Island. We're asking to see more representation on the corporate boards. I think this has been a long-standing issue. This has not made significant progress in the past decade. And so we're looking to kind of jumpstart and give women a little bit more of a chance in the corporate boardroom, which has been one of the hardest glass ceilings to break. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We have received written testimony in favor from Laura Westerberg, and then we've received written testimony against from the Rhode Island Business Coalition. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5905. All right, next we will go to House Bill 5909 by Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. This would regulate the distribution of food products containing the drug Kratom, a drug of concern for its stimulant and sedative effects to consumers by the Department of Health. Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy.
Thank you so much. So this is a piece of legislation I introduced on behalf of the American Kratom Association. Kratom is a natural product, and in the past number of decades, there's been a lot of scrutiny placed on this particular product here in the United States. It is a tropical plant, which primarily is grown in Thailand. It's actually been a boon to the indigenous people of that particular country, as well as in Southeast Asia, because it actually provides an analgesic purpose. Here in the state of Rhode Island, several years ago, the Department of Health made a decision in which they decided to basically ban the sale of Kratom products here in the state of Rhode Island. And that's when I first started talking with folks from the American Kratom Association. Since that time, we did have a meeting with Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott, as well as Dr. McDonald and some of the other people from the Department of Health. And before the crisis shut everything down here in the state of Rhode Island, at that time it appeared that the health department was looking to perhaps relook at their particular decision. So rather than me concentrating on speaking further on this, I wanted to give some of the witnesses their opportunity to speak on this, Mr. Chair, and then feel free to ask me any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy? Seeing none, we'll go to the first witness, Mack Hatto from the American Kratom Association. Mack, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Mack Hatto. I'm the Senior Fellow on Public Policy with the American Kratom Association. And as Representative Kennedy has mentioned, the ban that exists on Kratom in Rhode Island initially was imposed in the 2016 era when the U.S. Food and Drug Administration had circulated information about Kratom that has subsequently been found to be inaccurate and incomplete. And in fact, in 2018, the Department of Health and Human Services, who is the primary agency responsible for the submission of recommendations for scheduling, formally withdrew the scheduling recommendation before the Drug Enforcement Administration. And they did so based on the fact that scientific research did not sufficiently support the action for the banning of Kratom. And they also indicated that the information about the safety risk was also inadequate and insufficient. And they concluded that until that evidence is available, there would be a substantial and significant public health risk associated with banning of Kratom, particularly for those people that are finding it useful to replace dangerous drugs that are used for the management of acute and chronic pain. We understand the concern of the Department of Health, but the Department of Health and Human Services has spoken authoritatively on this issue. The only issue of controversy that seems to remain is the position that Kratom doesn't have any medically approved uses. In fact, there are thousands of products that are used successfully by consumers to manage their health and well-being that do not have an approval by the FDA. Kratom is one of those. Caffeine is another, nutmeg, St. John's wort, a number of products that have therapeutic effects when they're used responsibly by consumers, but they're certainly not subject to ban. So we encourage the committee to please pass this to the floor. Let's let the Rhode Island become the fifth state that has passed the Kratom Consumer Protection Act that provides adequate protections for consumers. I'll end with that. Glad to answer any questions, and please read the letter from HHS that I submitted and the testimony. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, next we will go to Senator Kurt Bramble from the Utah. Senator Kurt Bramble, welcome to the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony. Senator, you're on the line. Senator, can you hear us? Senator, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to give some insight. In Utah, we passed the first Kratom Consumer Protection Act in the nation. The reason that I was willing to sponsor it, when you look at the opioid epidemic, you look at what's happening with drugs that are destroying families. When I did a deep dive into the existing science on Kratom, Kratom being a plant, it's a tree. The leaves of the tree have an alkaloid in them. The alkaloids apparently act on our opioid receptors, but unlike narcotics, where you have respiratory depression, you have a mental impairment, etc., Kratom doesn't have any of those attributes. And when I opened the bill file, I immediately was flooded with emails from constituents and citizens throughout Utah and literally throughout the country saying that Kratom saved their life, that they couldn't break the opioid habit, but when they started taking Kratom, they were able to break the addiction cycle. They were able to get past their withdrawal. We have testimony, just email after email, personal testimonies that Kratom has been successful. What we found the problem with Kratom is that bad actors will adulterate it. They'll mix it with dangerous chemicals, narcotics, barbiturates. So the Kratom Consumer Protection Act says basically you can't adulterate, meaning mixing it with chemicals. You can't concentrate or synthesize the alkaloids. It has to be pure plant. It has to be independently lab certified, and the product has to be properly labeled. If a Kratom distributor or Kratom manufacturer meets those criteria, Kratom is legal in Utah and has been since 2019. We have seen a huge success in our state as we battle opioid addiction, as we look at pain management. Some of the other side effects, benefits, there's anecdotal evidence about depression, anxiety, and other things. We believed it was well worth the effort to provide a safe and secure supply to give our constituents confidence that when they buy Kratom, that they're not buying some adulterated product mixed with fentanyl or morphine or heroin or other products. With that, Mr. Chair, I don't know how much time I've got, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Senator. We really appreciate it here today. Are there any questions for Senator Bramble? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we will go to Jack Henningfield from Vernier Associates. Mr. Henningfield, you may proceed with your testimony.
Great. Good evening. I'm Jack Henningfield, Vice President, Research Health Policy at Vernier Associates and Adjunct Professor of Behavioral Biology at Johns Hopkins University. I've been involved in the science and regulation of a broad range of substances since the 1970s at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, or NIDA, and Johns Hopkins. At Vernier Associates, I advise on pharmaceuticals, dietary products, including Kratom. Let me start with a recently disclosed August 2018 letter from the United States Department of Health and Human Services to the DEA. That letter withdrew FDA's 2017 request to schedule Kratom's key alkaloids. That would have effectively banned Kratom from consumer use. The DHHS letter is science-based, and it includes conclusions that I and other Kratom experts have come to. The DHHS stated that scheduling Kratom carries, and I quote, a significant risk of immediate adverse public health consequences for potentially millions of users of Kratom, such as those suffering with intractable pain and those who might switch to highly lethal opioids, risking thousands of deaths from overdoses. The DHHS letter further stated, there is still debate among reputable scientists over whether Kratom by itself is associated with fatal overdoses. The letter also cited a study showing that mitragynine has low abuse potential. Bottom line, Kratom is not a narcotic like opioid, and it can be part of the solution to the opioid crisis. I reviewed the letter from Rhode Island's Department of Public Health, or Department of Health, and I must say that it is at odds with the U.S. DHHS letter and new science. Recent studies show that mitragynine reduces opioid seeking and withdrawal in standard NIDA-type animal models. These findings are consistent with scientific surveys of Kratom consumers and research supported by NIDA. Kratom does not meet the standards for approved drugs, but that is not the point. Kratom is saving lives across the nation and in Rhode Island. Kratom consumers would be well served by regulation to ensure that the Kratom they purchase is pure, not adulterated, and meets other conditions provided by Bill 5909. I will be pleased to meet with Rhode Island's Department of Health to discuss the new science and provide you with any further information. I've sent some written materials. Thank you very much for your time with this important bill and for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We have received written testimony against from the Rhode Island Department of Health. We've received written testimony for from the American Kratom Association, Jordan Goyette, Jack Hennefield, and we received written testimony from the U.S. Department of HHS. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5909. Next, we will go to Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy's Bill 5910 in regard to nonprofit dental service corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this particular piece of legislation I introduced on behalf of our dental community here in the state of Rhode Island. And what it would do is authorize the insurance commissioner and within the office of the health insurance commissioner to review dental fees paid to participating dentists by a nonprofit dental service corporation to ensure that they are fair and reasonable. Dentists in our state at the present time who choose to participate in the various plans that are available basically have two options. There's Delta Dental of Rhode Island and there's Blue Cross Dental of Rhode Island. There may be some other smaller plans that are out there, but those are the two main ones. Through the years, Blue Cross has increased the reimbursement levels to the dental community, but Delta Dental has, for all intents and purposes, kept the rates locked for the past 12 years. So you basically have a number of dentists in the state of Rhode Island who have not received any increase in their reimbursement, no matter how difficult the procedure is that they're doing, whether it's a cleaning or whether they're doing a crown or whatever the procedure happens to be. That's become a concern, and so they asked me to introduce this legislation to see if perhaps by getting the Office of Health Insurance Commissioner to look at this particular proposal, that perhaps we can come to an agreement to make this more fair and reasonable. As a dentist, you do not get to choose what your terms are with your contract. You are handed the terms. If you choose to participate in that particular health plan, that's it. You choose to participate, and unfortunately for the dental community, there hasn't been too many updates to the existing agreement within the health plan. And that's why we're at this particular stage now. We have many dentists who are now at the age where they're thinking about retiring. A dentist can't even sell their practice, even if they wanted to today. Nobody wants to come into Rhode Island and buy a dental practice Nobody wants to come to Rhode Island and even practice as a dentist because of these low reimbursement rates. I don't think there is anyone, if you were concerned about the fact that the minimum wage hasn't gone up in a very long period of time, well, the dentist would tell you the same thing. While most people would say, oh, they're dentists, they're doing really well. The fact of the matter is, if you haven't seen your reimbursements rise in 12 years, that's a problem. Nobody, and I would say no one within Delta Dental is still accepting the same salary or same rate of pay today as they had 12 years ago. It's just not happening. And yet, these dentists are finding that they cannot get these higher rates of reimbursement. So I have brought this forth. I think we're going to probably hear from some of the dental community tonight, but I think this definitely deserves a look by this committee.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Representative Fenton Fong.
Yeah, thank you so much, Speaker Pro Tem. I had like 7 dentists reach out to me on this bill. I can't imagine, especially with all the incredible increases in technology in dentistry, that they haven't had any update. Insurance premiums keep going up, and they're not seeing it on the backside, so obviously where is all that money going that we're paying into our premiums? The one thing, too, that really struck me is during COVID, the amount that they've had to spend on PPE is so they were telling me it's like literally 50-fold what they were doing before. So all of these things are adding up. I think this is definitely overdue in time. Thank you so much for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. We're going to go to our witnesses. First up is Andrew Gazero III from Rhode Island Dental Associates. Andrew, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. So, thank you, representatives, for hearing me tonight. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Dr. Andrew Gazero. I chair the Council of Dental Benefits for the Rhode Island Dental Association. The dentists in Rhode Island are dedicated to improving the health of the people of Rhode Island. Yet for 13 years, dentists have been advised by Delta Dental that their company is unable to increase the fee allowances. With that in mind, we'd like to report the following. Delta Dental was established as a nonprofit to provide dental benefits to the people of Rhode Island. It has grown to become the parent company of 2 real estate holding companies, a venture capital firm, and for-profit corporations, allowing them to do business in Massachusetts and nationwide. These companies own 39 Smith Street with an assessed value of $8.9 million and 10 Orm Street with an assessed value of $6.5 million. They have raised their premiums yearly, yet their operating costs are lower than they were 25 years ago, and as of 2019, they had roughly $147 million in reserves and about $270 million in annual revenues. Their paid board of directors are individuals who are executives of some of the largest and most influential businesses in the state of Rhode Island, yet there is only one dentist on the board. They provide dental plans to nearly every large employer, 38 municipalities, every college and university, and the state itself. They are currently named as part of a class action lawsuit filed by the American Dental Association alleging violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act. They have not raised their allowances to the dentists since 2008, while Blue Cross of Rhode Island, which already had higher allowances, increased them in 2020, despite the pandemic, by 6% across all procedures. When compared to the average fees for Rhode Island, no Delta allowance meets an average fee. In fact, the allowances result in 30 to 50% discounts from a dentist's usual fee. To offset these discounts, dentists must charge patients without insurance more, making it harder for patients without insurance to receive care. In a study conducted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics that reported on the average annual income of general dentists, they ranked Rhode Island as being one of the top states to practice dentistry. In actuality, they mislisted the information as a net wage when it was actually the gross wage. Forbes magazine went on to publish the same erroneous information. In addition, less than 50% of the Rhode Island dentists had provided data for that survey. In 2020, Delta Dental reported that they paid an average of $86 million annually to dentists, which averages out to about $65 per hour per dentist. If a dental office employs one hygienist at $40 per hour, one assistant at $20, and a front desk at $18, then the dentist operated at a loss treating patients with Delta Dental.
Thank you.
From 2011 to 2018, the executive salaries at Delta Dental of Rhode Island rose 57%, from $2.1 million to $3.3 million. The current CEO, his salary from 2008 to 2018 increased by 79%. To be clear, this bill is not designed to increase a dentist's profits. Instead, it will provide an open discussion on how the fee allowances are determined and whether or not they are at reasonable levels. Currently, the Office of the Health Insurance Commissioner lacks the ability to investigate or have any input on the fee allowances dentists must accept. As such, the dentists currently have no protection or mediator to help when they feel there is an unfair condition.
Thank
This
you.
bill will hit the power to determine them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we will go to Paul McDonald. Paul, you may proceed with your testimony.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I suppose the shot clock is in order tonight, so I'll take half of my testimony. My name is Paul McDonald. I'm Legislative Director of Teamsters Local 251, and I'm also the labor lobbyist for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 99. On behalf of the members and their families, we strongly oppose House Bill 5910. Every year or two, we have to negotiate our contracted dental and medical benefits. Dental is a very important benefit to our members and their families, especially those with children, and this bill gives us great concern. As you all may know, along with this important benefit, we have to negotiate wages, pension, working conditions, etc. Our health funds have been forced at times to offset the cost of dental and medical by using part or all of our wage increases to keep our dental plan in place. Dental is not cheap. It's very expensive. Healthcare premiums in Rhode Island have reached levels for our plan, driving up the cost of dental care. The premium crisis that we're faced with is really concerning, that they will impact our plans to the point and quite possibly cripple our efforts to give our members and their families the best possible dental care coverage that we are able to negotiate. I've used the term negotiate on several occasions now, and that is that the doctors should be negotiating, not taking the route that they seem to want to take this evening. Having the insurance commissioner possibly set rates for Blue Cross and Delta Dental is just plain wrong. No one is suggesting to set rates for doctors or lawyers, nor bread or milk. No business that I'm aware of have public hearings to ensure that all their costs are comfortably covered. With all due respect to the dentists, especially mine, why should they be singled out for this type of special protection? To increase our dental costs without negotiation would be totally unfair to the members and their families that we represent. We ask you to oppose House Bill 5910. Mr. Chairman and committee members, I thank you for your time. Always happy to see you and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony, Paul. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we will go to Patrick Quinlan from the Rhode Island Dental Association. Patrick, you may proceed with your testimony. If you could just shut off the volume in the background.
Thank you, Senator, Representative. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. I want to thank our sponsor, Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy. By the way, he is recognized throughout this country as one of the leading authorities on dental benefit plans. Our concern is this. When we look at the dental office, I just listened to Paul McDonald's testimony, and I've known Paul many years. He's a long-serving director from Delta over the years. I'm not sure if he still serves. But the bottom line is he's asking the dentist not to take any increase. He's also saying that we should negotiate. Well, I know Paul is not a lawyer. I'm an antitrust lawyer by training. We cannot negotiate jointly. That's against the law. It's a federal law and a state law. The key point here is really important. You have 600 businesses in Rhode Island. Their costs have gone up every single year. And those businesses are dental offices. All we are asking is to allow the Office of Health Insurance Commissioner to do its job and ensure fairness to providers. We have a very robust Office of Health Insurance Commissioner. It was designed to make sure that providers were treated fairly as one of their key benefits or key reasons for existence. The other point I really want to address, I don't know that Mr. McDonald or any of his union colleagues have foregone raises throughout these years to buy dental care. I think that's a fake argument. We are losing dentists, and I'll just close with this. I began lobbying for the Dental Association 34 years ago, and I have worked for them every year on issues. One of the key problems I have with the argument they're making here is we are losing dentists. When I began representing Rhode Island as a dental association, new dentists were coming in. Now they are retiring. They cannot sell their practices. At least 5 oral surgeons in the last year and a half have just basically shut the doors, closed it, and sold the equipment because they had no one who could make a living running that practice on those rates. Also, periodontics. If people need periodontic treatment, we are losing our periodontists. If one of the dentists has sent in a letter, his broker to sell his practice has told him, don't even list it because I've tried for 3 years. There is no one interested in buying a perio practice from Rhode Island because the fees don't cover the cost of rendering the service. So I ask all of you, members of this committee, to think about all of those small businesses and concern. We're not asking to set fees. We're not asking OHIC to set fees. We are merely asking them to look at the adequacy, which is what is done in many states, including our neighbor, Massachusetts. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Patrick, was on the phone extensively for probably a good half hour, 45 minutes with the dentist this afternoon. And after a discussion with him, I had more questions, and mainly about what the former person that talked from the Dental Association. Can you explain how Delta Dental, being that they're a non-profit organization, how they can redirect money to buy buildings and that under a different entity?
I cannot explain that, and I wish I could. The Altus company is something they created and run as a for-profit up in Massachusetts. It's worth, according to what I read in the Globe, is almost $50 million. They have another company, Choosy. They just bought the building across from the Marriott, where I think it's praised in the millions. That's a nationwide app that runs dentistry. So I don't know how they can get away with doing that. I am sure they have very good lawyers. They are highly respected lawyers. Under the tax code, there must be a way. But, the money is not staying in Rhode Island, number one. And number two, it is not being used to pay for the services for the subscribers the way it should. There's no business that can survive for 13 years without a pay increase of some kind. I hope that answers your question, Representative Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Patrick.
Are there any additional questions for the witness? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony, Pat. Last, we will go to Frank Mickman from Advocacy Solutions. Frank, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Frank McMahon on behalf of Delta Dental of Rhode Island. I'm not even sure where I should begin. But first and foremost, Delta Dental of Rhode Island is opposed to this bill. This bill singles out Delta Dental, and currently is drafted, it also singles out Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Rhode Island. As really the only dental insurance carriers become subject to an unprecedented requirement that fee allowances they pay to their participating dentists, and the methodology of determining them will be subject to public hearings and written approval of an insurance commissioner. By the way, the sole specified criterion for the insurance commissioner to look at and to base his approval merely relates to whether or not the fees that Delta Dental and others offer are considerate of the cost of running a dental practice. This bill would effectively make the commissioner the arbiter of the profit level dentists should be given by carriers that they are not even required to contract with. This bill's got a lot of unintended consequences, and a couple of them are as follows. The bill's singular focus on the cost of running a dental practice in Rhode Island excludes consideration of the interests of consumers and group purchases like employers, including the state of Rhode Island in terms of the overall cost of health care, which is always rising. You have in your packet, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, a letter signed by the Newport County Chamber of Commerce, the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, the Rhode Island Hospitality Association, the Northern Rhode Island Chamber, the Rhode Island Manufacturers Association, the Rhode Island Business Group on Health, and the Rhode Island Small Business Economic Summit, as well as two other small companies, Ivy Wealth Management and W Community Health Parties, all opposed to this legislation because this is going to have an impact on rates overall. Delta Dental has done a good job at maintaining its rates in Rhode Island, and at the same time, it has compensated dentists in a very, very fair manner. So let's talk about that for a second. Dr. Gazero said something to the effect that dentists in Rhode Island aren't able to compete. Well, that is not true according to the American Dental Association. They did a study in 2018, and Rhode Island is one of the top 3 states in terms of the highest average annual income after adjusting the cost of living. He mentions a Forbes article, which has not been retracted. It is on point on dentist compensation in November of 2019, and it mirrored that analysis. Rhode Island was 3rd on the list at $254,190 per year, adjusted for the cost of living for dentists in Rhode Island. So just a couple thoughts. So since 2010, Delta Dental has it's changed its regular fee-for-service payments to dentists. It's not that we haven't given them a rate increase in the course of 12 years. We've changed the way we give rate increases. Now it's a value-based incentive model providing those 618 dentists that Mr. Quinlan just mentioned, and those 618 dentists have just received a total of additional payments of over $35 million, the vast majority of which was paid during the past 5 years. So to answer Representative Fenton Fong's question about PPE and the impacts that it's had on practices, Delta Dental has paid nearly $5.7 million in PPE support payments to dentists. Grants, straight flat-out grants. In addition, Delta Dental has provided direct and indirect donations of thousands of face shields to dentists, as well as interest-free loans to sustain dental offices that had to temporarily close during the pandemic, due, by the way, to no fault of anybody. The pandemic was such a major issue. So people talk about that Delta Dental and Blue Cross control the market. Well, that's not necessarily true in the sense that we've got competition from large out-of-state carriers like United, Cigna, Aetna, MetLife, Guardian, and others, all selling health insurance and dental insurance in the state of Rhode Island. It's a very competitive market in Rhode Island. So we think that this is an issue that is just, the dentists don't like the way we manage our rate process because it's a value-based incentive system. We have, in fact, raised rates on certain procedure codes over the course of those 12 years that Mr. Quinlan and Dr. Gazero testified. They just don't like the process in which we did it. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. And at the end of this, obviously, we Delta Dental, we are opposed to this legislation.
Thank you. Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy has a question.
Frank, so I am, based on the testimony we already heard, we recognize that Delta Dental is a not-for-profit organization.
Correct.
So why is Delta Dental acquiring so much real estate here in the city of Providence? Is that part of their core mission? Are they now a not-for-profit as well as an organization that is there in order to acquire real estate as well as to set up additional corporations across the border in Massachusetts?
So let me just be clear. Delta Dental of Rhode Island is a nonprofit dental service corporation. Altus Dental is a for-profit corporation that's incorporated that does business in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Altus is the entity that owns the real estate, not Delta Dental. Delta Dental is a tenant to Altus Dental. It's a competing product, if you will, and primarily, as Pat Quinlan mentioned, Altus Dental operates in the state of Rhode Island. There are two buildings in question, the Delta Dental building, which has the sign on it right across from you, and the State House there, and then the Choosy building, which is where Channel 6 used to be, right behind it in the same park. They share a parking lot. Those are the two pieces of real estate that Altus owns. Delta Dental doesn't own them. Delta Dental's a tenant. So let's not. I don't think Mr. Quinlan was being disingenuous, but they're separate corporations. They're one's a for-profit entity, one's a non-profit entity, and that's perfectly within the jurisdiction of the law in Rhode Island and Massachusetts.
And so based on what you're telling me, Frank, the ability to set up that for-profit corporation, there was no monies that came from Delta Dental and their patients in order to do this. Somehow this for-profit corporation just was created like that and suddenly had all this money available to it to acquire these particular buildings. That's what you're telling us.
No, I'm not telling you that, Representative Kennedy. What I'm telling you is they are separate companies, and Altus Dental has been doing business for several years now. They just didn't create them in the middle of the night and buy real estate like the dentists are alleging. This is completely above board These are completely above board transactions. Altus Dental is doing business in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a very successful dental insurer in Massachusetts. And it really came as a result of responding to the markets and the customer demands that they have when they're out there selling their products.
Well, again, Frank, for a company that has only been in operation for 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years tops, to already have acquired a building on Orm Street that's worth $40 million, boy, they must be really doing something well. Because I cannot, for the life of me, imagine that they managed to make profits like this in such a short amount of time. Because most businesses are not capable of being able to do that, Frank. So maybe there's a little bit of money changing hands between the profit and the not-for-profit side. And I'd like to see some additional information provided to the committee as to how this is being done.
Sure, and I respectfully disagree with you, Representative Kennedy. I am confident that building did not cost $40 million. It probably may have a tax valuation of $40 million, but that's not what the sale price of that. And as you well know, in your business, in your line of work, there's a difference between assessed valuation and what a property actually sells for. So I'd be happy to get you some more information and get the committee some more information on that, Mr. Chairman and Representative Kennedy.
Chairman Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Frank, I'm going to ask you a question about, you had testified about how competitive the dental insurance business is with all these other ones, United Health and everything else that's have all these. How is the reimbursement rates from Delta Dental compared with the other major insurance companies?
So my understanding, Representative Phillips, is that they're comparable. So the Delta Dental would not be in business today if it wasn't able to keep its rates low and have employers as based on those companies that I just mentioned in the letter that are opposing this bill. You've got to remember, it's the employers that pay these dental rates, that pay the insurance premiums for their employees. For the most part, there are private pays and so forth, but that's the bottom line. The bottom line is these are rate increases that will have to go to or go against the companies that purchase Delta Dental or Blue Cross or whomever that they buy the dental insurance from, in order to be able to pay for these just across the board arbitrary grants of income to these, to these dentists. So, again, I want to reiterate, in 2010, Delta Dental changed its regular fee-for-service payments to dentists with a value-based incentive model. Over the course of the last 5 years alone, those 618 dentists have received over $35 million in payments. That's a rate increase. Whether they like to think of it or not, that money is being distributed to dentists.
Okay, as a follow-up question, where you said that they've given out over $35 million, do you have a specific formula, or does Delta Dental have a specific formula how they come to this, how much each of the dentists has it? Because the conversation I had today with one of the dentists was that it was an arbitrary figure. One year he got X amount of dollars, the next year he got like 60% less, then the next year he got like 30% more than that 60% less. So he's just confused as to how Delta Dental is coming up with this formula. Can you supply us with that formula so I can go back to this gentleman?
We certainly can, Representative, and this is something that's in the contract that each dentist has. Each dentist has a professional provider representative at Delta Dental that he or she is able to communicate with. They communicate with them hundreds of times a week. There is lots of communication between dental offices and the Delta Dental plan here in Rhode Island. But we'd be happy to give you more information on exactly what that value-based incentive model works. It's within the contract that these dentists all sign. And if your particular dentist doesn't understand the project, the model, we certainly could reach out to him as well and make sure that he does.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We've received a written testimony against from Delta Dental of Rhode Island, West Bay Community Health, and the Rhode Island Business Coalition. And then we've received written testimony in favor from Andrew Gazero III. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5910. Next, we will go to House Bill 6131 by Representative Lombardi, which would vacate the forfeiture or revocation of the charter of Robert O. Cerrone Auto Repair Services Incorporated. Representative Lombardi, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think, Mr. Chairman, thank you, members of the committee. I think it's self-explanatory. You have your own process and procedure for that, and I would certainly defer. I don't want to waste any time. I know we've had a long day already.
Okay, so that concludes the hearing on House Bill 6131. Next, we will go to House Bill 5911 by Representative Lombardi, an act related to commercial law, general regulatory provisions. Representative Lombardi.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before I begin, would you want me to testify on all three bills, or would you want to go one at a time? I'll defer to you.
We can put all three in play. So House Bill 5911, House Bill 5913, and House Bill 5912.
All right, and so 5911, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is a bill relating to an act that would prohibit the practice of patient brokering and would provide penalties and enforcement. In an interest of saving time, if you were to look on page 4 clearly delineates what the penalties would be, for each act, and then page 2, it would delineates what the problems are, how you would present a problem for yourself, and what the patient brokering prohibited actions are. Fee splitting, kickbacks, solicitation, benefits, bonus, rebate, kickback, and things of that sort, Mr. Chairman. And I will endeavor to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Representative Casey.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
We can.
Thank you. Rep. Lombardi, if you could just give a brief explanation as to the actual process of what patient brokering is, please.
Yes, if you were to look on page 2 of the bill, which is 6-13.4-2. It clearly delineates what it is. It's any unfair sales practice for any person, including any healthcare provider or healthcare facility, to offer or pay a commission, benefit, bonus, rebate, kickback, bribe, directly or indirectly in cash or in kind. That's that part. The second is to solicit or receive a commission, benefit, or bonus. The third is solicit or receive a commission, benefit, or rebate via fee splitting. And anyone who would aid, abet, advise, or otherwise participate in the conduct prohibited under this section. That's so. I think it's fairly clearly stated over there, Representative Chairman.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions for Representative Lombardi? Seeing none, I will just say that we have received written testimony in favor from Laura Westberg, so that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5911.
Mr. Chair, was that in favor or opposed?
That is in favor.
Thank you.
All right, you may proceed with the next bill.
Okay, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, members, I would like to go to 5913. That's okay?
Please.
All right. Related to business and professions, pharmaceutical cost transparency. And what this does, it would allow direct the State Board of Pharmacy, in collaboration with the Department of Health, to annually identify up to 15 prescription drugs on which the state spends significant health care dollars due to increase in costs, and without reading it verbatim. And we've read a lot about this with insulin, and certainly that's something that's near and dear to me. And recently, I think I gave the story of the young lady who was on who has cystic fibrosis, which is a very severe lung disease. Their life expectancy is 30 to 35. The last stage, if you qualify as a lung transplant, and her parents were trying to get a grant, and they were advised that they should either get a divorce or one of the parents should quit their job, which I don't think is the answer to anything. Certainly, it does nothing to keep families together, but it's just a measure by which we will keep an eye on how some of these things are. I mean, insulin is diabetes is something that's running rampant. There's 27 million cases known in the United States. Probably another 50 million people who may be on the borderline. We don't know how many of certainly with COVID, a lot of our children have been staying home. At a computer, they're not outdoors playing sports. Diet, exercise, behavior modification, education are very important with this disease, but very easily with childhood diabetes especially. And, it doesn't matter what age you are. I mean, I was diagnosed in 1995 with type 1. So it's a strange disease that, creeps up on you in different ways. And a lot of people just can't afford it. It's cost prohibitive. And, when you're going to make a decision whether to put a roof over your head, food on your table, or, you need your medication, or your children, even worse, need the medication. It's just not fair. So someone should be monitoring that. And what this does gives the provision to monitor that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry if I got a little long-winded on that, but something that's near and dear to me. I'll endeavor to answer questions if I'm able to.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Representative Lombardi? Seeing none, Representative Lombardi, we just have one witness on your bill. If we can just take that person very quickly. So if we can get Nicholas Doherty on the line. Nicholas, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to join everyone here tonight. Again, my name is Nick Doherty. I'm the Director of Policy at Pharma in the New England region up in Boston. Here to testify in opposition to 5913. We did submit a very detailed statement to the committee. Given the hour, I'm just going to go over a few of the items in there. And just want to start out, we do not oppose transparency when it's meaningful and is considerate of the entire supply chain in a way that's going to help policymakers like everyone sitting in that room focus on the real impacts for patients. This bill, though, it does raise some concerns for us. The biopharmaceutical industry is already one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country, and disclosures of trade secrets and confidential and proprietary information could undermine the beneficial competition that exists today and could increase costs. We feel this way because the bill does not contain adequate confidentiality provisions to protect the sensitive information that could raise legal issues, and importantly, it might have the opposite effect of its intent and lead to increased costs. This is a concern the Federal Trade Commission has raised on multiple occasions. Companies already report extensive information to the federal government about costs, sales, clinical trials, total research and development, and expenditures through SEC 10K filings. So the bill as drafted today does not actually indicate what information a manufacturer would need to provide that meets one of the triggers that would require disclosure. Instead, the legislation leaves that decision to the Attorney General through a regulatory process with no meaningful criteria. We feel it's a big problem because the legislation imposes substantial penalties for noncompliance, and it does not provide any guidance on how manufacturers might comply. So again, just want to stress we do not oppose transparency. I would just feel an approach that would incorporate more meaningful transparency across the supply chain, focused on consumer-oriented data, similar to allowing patients to understand formularies, preferred drug lists, what the restrictions mean for out-of-pocket costs and access, and whether the manufacturer rebates are being used to reduce out-of-pocket costs instead of getting passed on to other members of the supply chain, like insurers and PBMs. So again, trying to keep it brief, stop there, and happy to answer any questions that someone may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Representative Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nick, just to summarize your concern, I'm wondering, are you really only opposed to it because of the power delegated to the Attorney General? And then if that's the case, is it fair to presume that you'd be open to working with the committee and Representative Lombardi on amending some of that language and helping to bring some transparency to drug prices?
So we'd be happy to work with the committee and make sure that there was some meaningful transparency that was put in place. But as it's drafted now, there's no criteria of what would be requested by the AG. The information that, as it's drafted, the AG, there are really no guardrails in place of the information that could be requested, and that's the concern that we have, given the proprietary and confidential information that's involved in the entire supply chain, and the potential effect that by sharing that information or that information becoming public, it could actually adversely impact contracts across the entire system that could be detrimental to patients. The SPC has written about this extensively, where if the information were public, it actually could raise prices because everyone would know what everyone's paying instead of trying to ensure the best value is being made available.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Representative Potter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did not have a question until right at the end of that. So is that to say that your position is a lack of transparency is somehow beneficial to making drug prices cheaper?
No, what I'm saying is that as the language is drafted, we're unaware of what the information would be that the Attorney General may be requesting. And because of that, there's the possibility that it would open up all this proprietary and confidential information to be made public that could actually result in prices increasing.
Okay, are there any additional questions? Hearing none. Thank you for your testimony. We have received written testimony against from Pharma, and then we've received testimony from the ACLU requesting an amendment regarding the access to public records exemption. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5913. Representative Lombardi, we have House Bill 5912 regarding the COVID-19 pandemic insurance recovery. You may proceed.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. And so what this bill would do, it would allow business to have insurance policy in place for business interruption as of March 9, 2020 to make a claim from their insurance companies for the COVID-19 business impact. A business would be eligible for recovery if they had less than 100 employees in the state that work 25 or more hours a week to qualify for recovery under this act. And, you know, one of the things that the insurance companies are doing is say, well, you know, there's an exclusion, it's unconstitutional, and I've received letters ad nauseum about this. But again, it's the insurance companies not want to pay. And, you know, these are very unique times, and there should always be exceptions. And when, you know, you're talking about multi-billion-dollar corporations that don't want to pay, and you know, I'll give you, you know, some quick examples, you know, how this exclusion is unfair. You take Federal Hill. Federal Hill is an economic engine for the entire state of Rhode Island. Many of the business there employ many people of color, minority community, but many of the people that work in those, especially the restaurants, live in the neighborhood. They work 2 and 3 jobs without benefits to try and keep a roof over their head and trying to keep food on their table. So it's very, very important. It affects many, many people. And, you know, one of the best examples that I can give is Shallow Brothers. Shallow Brothers was a bakery that was open, you know, 85 years. They had expanded their business where they were shipping all over the world, you know, via the internet. And lo and behold, one of the partners passed away. She was very, very ill, and the other partner just couldn't do it anymore. So they tried to sell the business. They were unable to sell the business. And this is what was one of the icons and one of the goalposts, so to speak, of Federal Hill. I mean, without Shallows, I mean, there's not too many more, but, you know, 2 or 3 other businesses went under. Some are on, you know, are teetering, and it has an effect, you know, exponentially. It's just not an arithmetic effect. It has a geometrical effect. And now this is how it's affect Shallows. Shallows, the building was for sale. There's the art studio that was in the building has moved out subsequently. There's 3 tenants upstairs. So, I mean, it's a property that has 5 rents. And so what's happening is it was sold, and then because of the COVID, the offer was withdrawn. Somebody else tried to buy it. Again, because of COVID, they were not able to attain, you know, funding. The offer was withdrawn, and there's been like 5 offers on that building. And I can tell you this here, that the price of that building has gone from and let's put it this way, it's been cut nearly 50% what the value of that building is. So, and again, Shallow Brothers is Federal Hill. Shallow Brothers is Providence. Shallow Brothers was, you know, one and only, you know, remaining Italian bakeries in maybe the state of Rhode Island. Who knows? Certainly in the city of Providence. So, and that's why it's very, very important that we at least allow some of these businesses to put claims, let the insurance companies, you know, and again, they're going to complain, you know, but again, I say, look at the profit margins. And with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I will endeavor to answer some questions if you have any. And I really appreciate you considering this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
We have 2 witnesses. First up, we have Rory Whalen and then Frank O'Brien. So Rory, before the House Committee on Corporations, we have received your written testimony. So if there's anything additional you'd like to add.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you. I am Rory Whalen, Regional Vice President of Government Affairs for the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. As you noted, I have provided written testimony, so I will be brief at this late hour. I do want to highlight several points. Firstly, this bill is unconstitutional. In the minds of constitutional scholars, it's hardly a justiciable fact that the retroactive provision of the bill is simply unconstitutional. So I would urge the committee to consider the financial resources that would be diverted from an effort to defend this bill or this law that would otherwise help small businesses. Secondly, I would like to make clear that business interruption insurance is not designed to cover pandemics. It is a property policy that reimburses the insurer for financial loss resulting from direct physical damage, i.e. a fire. The coverage for a pandemic like this was never contemplated in these policies, and therefore no premium was paid. And then lastly, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, if we would suspend momentarily the clear constitutional barrier that this law presents, if enacted, this could lead to substantial solvency risk of insurers and their ability to pay other claims in the property and casualty sphere. And that is not simply my analysis, but as per my written testimony, that is the actual quote and written word from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, who are opposed to this legislation that, to my knowledge, has not been enacted in any other state. I do know in New England, both Massachusetts and other states have rejected this similar legislation. So with that, given the late hour, I appreciate your indulgence, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rory. Do any members of the committee have any questions for Rory? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next witness, Frank O'Brien. Hi, Frank.
Yes.
Hi, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. Can you just lower the volume behind you?
I did, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for having me today. I will be brief given the late hour. I have provided extensive written comments to the committee. This bill is very much like the bill that I was in front of this committee some weeks ago. I'd also, in closing, suggest to you that no other state has followed this approach, and in recent days, both your colleagues in the Massachusetts State Senate as well as the members of the Joint Committee on Health Care, Insurance, and Financial Services in the state of Maine have both rejected similar legislation by unanimous votes. With that, Madam Chair, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions for Frank? Seeing none, that will end our verbal testimony on this Bill 5912. We have written testimony against from the New England Surplus Lines Association, from the Wholesale and Specialty Insurance Association, from Lloyd's of London, from the APCIA and the NAMIC, and from the Defense Council of Rhode Island. And we have written testimony in favor from Jordan Goyette. And that will close the hearing on Bill 5912.
All right, next bill we will go to is 5515 by Deputy Speaker Lima. This was in regard to the deceptive trade practices. Deputy Speaker Lima, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two bills on deceptive trade. I'm going to go with the one 6142, please.
Sure, so we'll put both bills into place. So House Bill 6142 as well regarding the deceptive trade practices.
Awesome. All set?
Yep, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I've been putting in this legislation for many, many years. I got it passed the House and the Senate. Then Governor Kacheri vetoed it one year. And what it basically does is, in the law it says if a business is regulated, whatever that means, I mean if they have a license, all businesses are regulated, they can deceive you. There's no cause of action for a Deceptive Trade Act. I'll give you two very quick examples. There was a woman who went to the bank and it said, consolidate your loan, your rate will never go up above X%. And she switched her loan over a couple of months later, the rate went way up high. She went to court and was told in court the law needs to be fixed. Another gentleman went to buy a truck, and on the placard on the truck, it said it had a certain thing in the truck, Come to find out it didn't. Same problem. He went to sue. It says if a business is regulated in the state of Rhode Island, they cannot be sued for that cause of action of a deceptive trade. The National Consumer Law Center refers to Rhode Island statute as one of the terrible twos because it is only Rhode Island and Michigan that you cannot be sued for deceiving somebody. So this is a consumer protection law, and I am going with the 6142 because I've been working with the Attorney General's office. They're here to testify. They have two quick witnesses, and they have an amendment of which I am in favor, which will make it a better bill. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we will go to our first witness. We have Ryan Holt. Ryan from the Attorney General's office, you may proceed with your testimony. Ryan?
Sorry, Chairman, I was on mute.
You may proceed with your testimony.
Sorry about that. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ryan Holt, the Director of Legislative Affairs for Attorney General Morona, testifying in support of 6142 that Deputy Speaker Lima has introduced and the AG has stamped. We're very excited to work with the Deputy Speaker on this very important piece of consumer protection legislation, which has been a major priority of the Attorney General, which is why we have asked for this bill to be introduced in each of the 3 years of the administration. Most basically, we want to act when fellow Rhode Islanders are wronged, and we want to reinstitute the legislative intent that existed when this bill was passed. As Deputy Speaker Lima just mentioned, Rhode Island ranks either last or close to last when it comes to consumer protection laws, depending on how you're evaluating them. And we're seeking to just bring this more up to par. We're not trying to implement anything that's overly cumbersome. We're just trying to get things up to par to give regular folks an actual fighting chance. I know that the business community has some concerns with this bill. I've read some of their letters, and I'll note, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, that we will, certainly be willing to meet with them, hear their concerns out, and see if we can come to some common ground if necessary. But again, for those who represent businesses who operate in jurisdictions other than Rhode Island, what we're trying to do is really nothing new for these businesses. We are not introducing new requirements or new oversight that they would be subject to. I'll cut my comments short as my colleague Miriam Weisenbaum is speaking right after me. She can speak to this further and a lot more artfully than I can. Miriam is the chief of our civil division and has had a very distinguished legal career as one of Rhode Island's most highly respected attorneys. With that, unless there's any questions, I'm happy to turn it over to Miriam.
Thanks. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. Thank you,
Chairman.
Thank you, Ryan, for your testimony. Next, we're going to go to Frank O'Brien from the American Property Casualty. Frank, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Frank O'Brien with the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, and pleased to be before you today. I am in somewhat reluctant opposition to House Bill 6142. As the representative of the AG's office has noted, we have had productive conversations with the AG's office over the past couple of years, and we look forward to being able to continue those conversations on this particular piece of legislation. We do believe that the AG has an important role to play in consumer protection in Rhode Island. We also understand and believe that there are other regulators within the state of Rhode Island who play a similar consumer protection role. And we happen to be regulated by one of the more active ones, and that is the insurance division at the Department of Business Regulation. Our key concern is that we don't want to be in a position where we are regulated by two overseers. We are fearful of being put in a position where we're whipsawed between the desires of one regulator as opposed to the desires of another. We do believe that in situations where there are industries which are closely regulated like ours, there can be a more narrowly tailored exception than is currently in the statute. I think that we're optimistic about that. We'd like to work with the Attorney General on this particular issue, and we look forward to doing so. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we will go to Jordan Mickman from the Rhode Island Center for Justice. Jordan, you may proceed with your testimony.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jordan Mickman. I'm the supervising attorney at the Rhode Island Center for Justice, and I appreciate you for taking my testimony so late at night. I should also mention that I'm one of a few members in Rhode Island who's an active member of the National Association of Consumer Advocates. I've been practicing in the area of consumer law for about 9 years now, and I've been practicing in Rhode Island for the last 3 or 4 years, 2017, and I just wanted to comment that this bill restores the original intent of this law before the Supreme Court of Rhode Island reinterpreted the law. It puts Rhode Island's law in place with all of the other states across this country. These are model laws. They are the same, virtually identical pieces of legislation everywhere. And, you know, I know it's late, but it's just worth spending a second here. As it's written, the law says that nothing shall apply to actions or transactions permitted under laws administered by DVR. And the Supreme Court of Rhode Island interpreted the word permitted to include everything that's not expressly prohibited. And that was definitely not what the General Assembly intended when they passed this law. And don't be distracted by the industries opposing this bill. This bill is not going to duplicate regulation. It's very clear on its face that it does not duplicate any regulation. What they're actually doing is requesting immunity from liability when they engage in deceptive behavior simply because a regulatory agency hasn't expressly prohibited the conduct, as if regulatory agencies have commented on every single metaphysical possibility. And the point of an unfair deceptive trade practices bill is to remedy deceptive conduct that's not clearly already prohibited by law. That's the very point of this bill, and they're asking for an extraordinary exemption. The statutory exclusion for regulatory conduct is not intended to be a permission slip for businesses to engage in any conduct not expressly prohibited by the regulatory body. A contract that's plainly deceptive cannot somehow become lawful simply because a regulatory agency hasn't opined on the specific issue, or because the bad actor was so clever that they designed a scheme that hasn't quite been expressly prohibited yet. Scams are constantly evolving, and a flexible, unfair deceptive trade practice law is necessary to deter that conduct. No business should be permitted to engage in deceptive conduct, and that's never what this exclusion was intended to be about. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. We'll go next to Miriam Weisenbaum from the Attorney General's office. Miriam, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony, and I would ask that you just shut off the volume in the background.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and thank you to Madam Sponsor. My name is Miriam Weisenbaum, and I am the Chief of the Civil Division at the Office of the Attorney General. In that capacity, I lead the Consumer Protection Unit, whose mission is to protect the rights and resources of Rhode Island consumers, of your constituents. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address the committee in support of House 6142. This is a bill that will amend and activate the Deceptive Trade Practices Act by removing the blanket exemption that prevents victims of deceptive practices from getting relief. And I want to talk about why we need this. You know, there will always be people and businesses who hurt Rhode Islanders by deceiving and misleading them, and who use deception to separate families from their hard-earned income by trickery and outright misrepresentation. The Attorney General needs the basic legal tools to hold bad businesses accountable, to protect Rhode Islanders, and to give honest businesses the opportunity to make a living on an even playing field so they don't have to compete with the businesses who are willing to break the rules. To do that, we have to amend the state's deceptive trade practices. On the books, the DTPA is a law that makes unfair methods of competition and unfair or deceptive practices in the conduct of any trade unlawful. So how can unfair and deceptive practices be out of reach of the Office of the Attorney General when there's such a clear statutory mandate? The reason is because Rhode Island's Deceptive Trade Practices Act has been eviscerated by the Rhode Island Supreme Court, which established what, and others have spoken to this, what only one other state in the entire country has, a regulated entity blanket exemption. In Rhode Island, even when a business or person engages in conduct prohibited by the DTPA, misleading, misrepresenting, deceiving, falsely disparaging other businesses, that business will be exempt from accountability, and the victim will be without any effective civil remedy if there's even one regulation that touches that person or business. It's a regulated entity blanket exemption. Regulation somewhere exempts this bad conduct everywhere. The amendments to the DPA remove the blanket exemption. And it's only when a regulation permits the actual conduct that's being objected to that the conduct will be then exempt or outside the reach of the statute with this amendment. So what else does the amendment do? This also allows civil penalties on the first violation. Right now, a person can be hurt one time and badly, and, for example, our office, our Consumer Protection Unit, can't even touch it. Finally, the amendment increases the civil penalties that are applicable to this kind of conduct. But I want to talk about how many Rhode Islanders need this protection. How many Rhode Islanders engage in a transaction and then seek help because something's not right? We actually have those numbers because in the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Unit, just last year, we helped 10,500 consumers just in the last year. Now, not all of those people were victims of deceptive practices, but it gives you an idea of the magnitude of the need for this important amendment.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, we have received written testimony from the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, the Independent Insurance of Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Mortgage Bankers Association, the APCIA, as well as written testimony from the Credit Unions of Rhode Island Bankers Association, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island. We have received testimony in favor from the National Consumer Law Center, as well as the Center for Justice. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 6142. Representative Lima, the 5515, there are no witnesses on your bill. So that can...
I'm going to totally disregard that one because they're very similar, and I'm going to go with this one.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5515 as well. Next, we will go to House Bill 5780 by myself. This would update the credit for reinsurance, risk-based capital, and insurance holding company statutes to the current National Association of Insurance Commissioners standard. All these statutes relate to the financial standards applied to insurance companies domiciled in the state. This bill was put in at the request of the Department of Business Regulation, which has provided written testimony with the description of the bill and in support of it. We do have Frank O'Brien from the American Property Casualty, who will be testifying on this bill. Frank, you may proceed with House Bill 5780.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the hour grows increasingly late, I'll grow increasingly shorter, if I can mix my metaphors. I will just leave my public testimony to this. This is an NAIC accreditation issue This particular one clears up a few mistakes and whatnot from the version that was filed with the committee earlier, and we urge passage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. We've received testimony in favor from the APCIA, the DBR, and the American Council of Life Insurers, and that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5780. Next, we have House Bill 5778 by myself. This would amend a number of provisions relating to receiverships, retail installment contracts, licensing, security bonds, and resident agent reporting requirements in an effort to eliminate unnecessary requirements and/or clarifying language resulting in the reduction of the burden of financial businesses operating in Rhode Island. This was put in at the request of the Department of Business Regulation, which has provided written testimony in favor. We have received written testimony against from the Rhode Island Mortgage Bankers Association. And that concludes are there any questions on this bill? Seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5778. We'll go next to House Bill 5779 by myself in regard to surplus lines insurance. This would clarify surplus lines licensing and eliminate an unnecessary bond requirement, eliminate the need for an in-person hearing in an appeal of a classification, and add additional lines of insurance to the commercial special risks statute. This was put in at the request of the Department of Business Regulation, which has provided written testimony in favor of this. And we have received written testimony in favor from the APCIA as well. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5779. Next, we will go to Representative Shanley's bill, which is 5914. This bill would prevent a motor vehicle dealer from leasing a new or used motor vehicle to a member of the public and require charge or collect relative to any vehicle excise tax in excess of the exact amount assessed to or paid by the lessor for excise tax to any city or town. This essentially eliminates the double taxation problem with leasing a vehicle where they collect the taxes and then, also it's paid once more. So there are no witnesses on this bill, and that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5914. Next, we have House Bill 6143 by Vice Chair Caldwell. This would vacate the forfeiture of revocation of the charter of Salon Vogue Incorporated. There are no witnesses on this bill, and that concludes the testimony on House Bill 6143. Last up, we have Whip Kazarian's bill. This would be powers during a state of emergency. Specifically, this act would grant the chair of the Public Utilities Commission and the Division of Public Utilities emergency powers during governor-declared emergencies for the restoration of all utilities. I believe Whip Kazarian's come down to testify on this. We have received written testimony against from the National Grid. We've received written testimony in favor from Jordan Goyette. And then we've received written testimony from the ACLU with amendments. Specifically, the ACLU's seeking an amendment which would clarify dealing with emergency response plans that utilities must submit on an annual basis to the agency. Whip Kazarian, would you like your votes recorded in the affirmative on?
Yes, please, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, and is there anything that you would like to add on House Bill 5956 by yourself?
Oh, yes, I would like to say a couple words, if I may.
Okay, you may proceed.
Yes, thank you. I put in this legislation this year because, as many of you know, my community in East Providence has experienced over 5 outages in the past year. Outages that have lasted unknown amounts of time, outages that have happened just in windy nights. And I just think that level of service from our energy provider, National Grid, is unacceptable. So I started researching what other states do, and I found this law that was passed in Massachusetts in 2009 that gave the state more powers to oversee how our energy companies are working. What this bill would do is a few things. It would create emergency response plans. It would also enable us to charge fees on National Grid if they don't meet those plans. And those fees would all go back to reducing the costs of people's energy costs. So that's what the bill does. I have been in touch with the DPUC and have talked to them about the bill. They are in full support of anything that we could do to try and protect our Rhode Islanders from losing energy or from losing their electricity and providing them with the best level of service. They did want to talk more about some of the specifics of the bill, and I'm going to continue to work with them on it, but I have been in touch with them, so thank you.
Excellent. Are there any questions for Whip Kazarian? Seeing none. Representative Stephen Lima, would you like your votes recorded in the affirmative?
Yes, please, Chairman.
So ordered. And that concludes the calendar that we have today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. We are adjourned. Thank you.